I'd say like you keep the argument as simple as possible. Okay, this is one vote for one citizen. Don't let it be an issue on the campaign trail. You get involved.
Welcome back to the Seeing Red podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Fulce. We have a great guest today to talk about one of the major constitutional amendments that's going to be on our ballot this November. Charlie Kolean is the Texas State Director of Americans for Citizen Voting. It's a national advocacy group dedicated to ensuring that only U.S. citizens vote in U.S. elections. He's been at the forefront of this issue, especially in Texas, and is one of the drivers behind why we have this constitutional amendment on our ballot going forward. He recently had an op-ed in the Washington Examiner. He writes prolifically on this issue and on other issues. And he focused on the risk that allowing this kind of loophole to exist allows foreign nationals to participate in our elections, and how that can really damage our democracy. So welcome to Seeing Red, Charlie. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I mentioned already, we're talking a little bit about this issue as it goes. You had your recent op-ed. Tell me a little bit about you and like how you got to working with Americans for Citizen Voting, and like what the scope of this problem is nationally.
Yeah. Well, so Americans for Citizens Voting has a very simple message: one vote per one citizen. It's a nationwide group, and really our focus is all on making sure states pass constitutional amendments to ensure only U.S. citizens can vote in elections.
Okay. So what are the kind of, some people might say this is a solution in search of a problem, right? Wherein that most elections are just, people know you have to be a citizen to vote. They don't necessarily know that some localities across the country have figured out a loophole, but that only technically applies to federal elections. At the federal level, the federal government can only determine, the restrictions on federal races with how our Constitution's written. So there are some states that don't have certain protections, and they can let local jurisdictions for their local school board or whatever city council type races. Then those jurisdictions can allow anyone who lives in their boundaries to vote in those elections,
yes,
including non-citizens. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me break this down for you. So what it's called is home rule. So for example, if a state allows for home rule, what that allows for is local governments to decide who can and who cannot vote in their own local elections. So what we've seen, and why we truly do feel this is a major issue. I mean, I think most people would agree only U.S. citizens should be voting in every election. But where we see it happening is on the local level. So for example, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., it was happening in New York City, where non-citizens are voting in local elections. And I mean, it's one of these things too. So like, well, why is this an issue? Shouldn't anyone whose kids attend the local public school be able to have a vote in who's on the school board or what the school is doing? I mean, their kids attend there after all. But like our view on this is very solid. Citizenship is for people who are going to be in the United States long term. They're citizens. They take a long-term view. Everyone else is ultimately a guest. And you just take a different view. I mean, it's like visiting someone's house. You would never go to the owner of a home and rearrange the furniture or expect to have a voice in how the household is run if you're a guest. Now, I think some people obviously take a different view when it comes to voting, the ones who are fine with non-citizens voting in local elections. But the overwhelming majority of Texans, there was a recent poll done, 88% of Texans agree that only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in local elections. So, I mean, we're not pushing a partisan agenda here. This is a bipartisan movement. This is a bipartisan group. So that's our thoughts on it, where this is something, universally, a lot of people are behind.
Sure. I mean, I hear you, and I actually agree with you 100%. But there are some critics of this, who I'm not going to have on the show, so I'll do my best to represent their view, who say that basically local government should be able to decide for themselves like who gets to vote for that government. Now, what would your criticism of that critique be, or what would you say to that argument?
Well, I would say like with citizenship comes the privilege of being able to vote in elections. Full stop right there. So only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in all elections. But ultimately, too, when you look at all local governments, where their funding is coming from, it never comes purely just from the people on the local level. I mean, local governments are funded by state grants, federal grants, and I mean, the people who are involved in the decision-making process of the politics to actually elect the people, I mean, those need to be U.S. citizens. I mean, it's as an American, you take a common view or you share common values on certain things. And I think citizenship compared to being a guest in this country, it's just a different, more long-term sustainable view you're going to take on who you're voting for and why.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your recent op-ed in the Washington Examiner. You're talking specifically about Proposition 16, right? Like Prop 16 yes. being the ballot initiative. It's not even a ballot initiative, it's a constitutional amendment initiative, where the people of Texas have to codify a whole bunch of stuff with how our Constitution's written after any given legislative session to make sure that we accede to what the government's trying to do. In this case, 2/3 of both houses, which required bipartisan support, passed this legislation. The governor signed it, and then now it's going to the people to give their thumbs up on it. Talk us a little bit through your argument for why us Texans should go, on a beautiful fall day when college football's happening yes. or whatever, to go out and vote in an election like this. It's only a couple weeks away. Early voting starts soon. Like, what is the reason for us to actually motivate to go out to do something that really isn't a big problem in Texas right now?
Yeah, well, you touched on some pretty important things. So this November 2025, it's an off-year election, and Proposition 16 is on the ballot. I believe there's 17 other constitutional amendments on the ballot. How this works is every constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate to appear on November's ballot. If they get over 50% of the people that vote for it, then it's put into the state constitution. Early voting starts 17 days before Election Day. So mid-October, that's when most polls are going to be open for you to be able to vote in. And I mean, I would say the main thing, so this took 3 years to get onto the ballot. This was not an easy process. This was not a simple idea to pitch. And we did have detractors along the way. But I mean, fundamentally, like, to get a lot of people on board, it was saying like, why let this be an issue? I mean, this is a pretty common sense thing. 88% of people support it. So as a politician, being able to vote, someone in the state legislature being able to vote on putting this on the ballot, why vote against something that people overwhelmingly support? Why stand in the way of it? I mean, if you're going to tell us it's not an issue, this is a made up issue. Well, I mean, number one, it's not in the state constitution, and we'd like it enshrined in there to really protect it. I mean, if Texas were to ever go blue or the leadership were to ever change, it'd be much easier to change with state law than the Constitution. And then I just also like the biggest thing, though, is like, hey, like we're all on the same page where we all think only U.S. citizens should be able to vote. I mean, I think most people agree with that. Like that was shown in the polling, that was shown in the vote in the state legislature. It was just making sure they saw the urgency to put it on the ballot. And ultimately, like, I think with something so popular, I think we are going to drive turnout to this election, but we have to get the word out and people have to know about it. So this is one of those constitutional amendments where if people read it, they're going to be in favor of it.
Sure. I think most people are. There is a certain cohort of folks that don't want to just keep adding stuff to the Constitution just because. Yeah. That said, other propositions on this ballot are going to include outlawing certain types of taxes or banning the state from doing certain types of taxes that the state has never done. So, like, we often proactively do this type of thing to prevent future governments from, where that might change to prevent it from happening. So, but with that said, right now, the way the voting works in Texas is that even local governments are required to work through the Secretary of State's office. So the state ends up controlling voter registration. So the way to go about getting local non-citizen voting to happen with a Democrat administration in the future would take several steps. This is just something that's going to be adding an extra step. Is that basically what this is going to do?
Well, let me touch on a few things. So I agree with the people that you mentioned. Consistently putting stuff on the Constitution, I don't think is good for anyone. I mean, I think whatever changes are made to the Constitution, the highest document for the state of Texas, the U.S. Constitution, the highest law of the land, only sacred things should be put in there. And I really do believe that many people would agree a change with stating only U.S. citizens can vote is a smart thing to do. And furthermore, you mentioned too, so with these tax issues, some of the constitutional amendments on there, this is a very strong preemptive step to stop any nonsense from happening in the future. And if people are going to say, oh, this is a made up issue, this could never happen. I mean, we listed a few areas: San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C. And you can say, well, those are just totally liberal cities. We're not like that in Texas. That will never happen in Texas. That will never come here. But for example, though, I mean, being able to serve on a board in the city of Dallas, non-citizens can do that. There was a measure that was put forth and it originally failed and was brought again and it passed. So, I mean, this movement to allow everyone, citizen or not, to participate in local government, in government, is coming to the state of Texas. And this is, I think, a tremendous step for voters to send a resounding message. Only U.S. citizens should be voting in our elections.
How do you expect turnout to change? Do you think this is the type of ballot initiative that's going to drive turnout? Do you think you're just kind of talking to folks who are already turning out? What's your intuition on like how this is going to impact the constitutional amendment, which are elections which are typically very, very sparsely voted in?
Yeah, so let me touch on something. So we do this in a lot of different states where we've gotten in the ballot, for example, Kentucky, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa. So we've gotten this in numerous states. And our biggest focus is like, we want to have common sense stuff on there for the good public policy. But like, I think any politician who goes on the campaign trail and talks about supporting this is going to find fellow friends and voters that support them. And anyone who campaigns against this is really going to have a big headache explain to the voters why this is a bad idea. For us, it's always been very easy to build a coalition of supporters for people saying, yes, I support this. This is a good change to the Constitution. Only U.S. citizens should be voting. And all the campaigns I've been involved in other states where we need to get this over the finish line, the detractors are what we're seeing, these far left groups, organized or unorganized, but it's not the mainstream left wing who's against this. It's usually the pretty extreme left wing people who stand firmly opposed to this.
Gotcha. Well, you've mentioned a few times places like New York, San Francisco, etc. Yeah. Like, what is happening in those locations? Like, kind of currently, like, what has been the ramification of non-citizen voting in those elections where they voted?
Yeah. So for
higher taxes, lower taxes, or just,
Yeah. So, I mean, for example, Chicago, non-citizens can vote in local school board elections. Washington, D.C., they were allowing every non-citizen to vote in elections. And let's just talk about some like anecdotal consequences. I mean, that involves foreign diplomats being able to vote in our local elections. So think of like the Chinese ambassador voting in a local DC election, the FSB or KGB spy chief voting in a local election. I mean, this is those are things I think most people, including myself, think are ridiculous. And these also happen to be extremely left-leaning cities as well that allow this. So, I mean, we've all seen the public policy ramifications of those politics and the people that live in them.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because I follow this issue in so much as I see the occasional headline or op-ed. It's not an issue that is often like pinging on my radar.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure this is something you live in day out. What are so as y'all have pushed different initiatives or amendments or constitutional amendments and legislation, the other side is, some folks are trying to push this on the, San Francisco, New York, they're trying to do it. How have those both sides faced in lawsuits or litigation fights through the process? Like, are we setting ourselves up, Texans, to be in some sort of litigation fight over this to where we're going to have to end up spending millions of dollars to defend this law?
That's a fantastic question. So there's not been any lawsuits to challenge saying only U.S. citizens can vote in elections. However, there's been lawsuits, for example, like in the state of New York, where it was challenged allowing non-citizens to vote. And that did cost the state a lot of money, or the city pursuing this far left-wing agenda. So I would argue it's pretty fiscally sound and prudent to pass this stuff. Number one, to make sure only people who have a really long-term view on what they want to see done in public policy. But also number two, I mean, we're not seeing any attempt for lawfare or anything against our movement.
I mean, that's great. Have you noticed, or what have you noticed the playbook for the other side to be in a state like Texas or other places? What is the opposition? Okay, let me just come back a little bit. You have places like New York, San Francisco, Chicago, etc. These cities. Then you talked about places like Kentucky, Ohio, Iowa. I've not seen any place where these two things have kind of butted heads. So, but we're in a place like in Texas, but we've already kind of covered where they don't really have an organized opposition currently. So not like Austin's already out there doing it. So now the city of Austin's going to fight for it, right? Or something like that. So what is typically the opposition to this kind of going to look like? I assume it's far leftist groups are just pushing this generally, but that's just my intuition. Is that accurate? Is that kind of what happens in these fights?
Yeah. So like I said, we're in numerous states and we fought these constitutional amendment battles in the state legislature. And, I would say most of the battle between us and our opponents is never in the public sphere. I think it'd be unrealistic to see TV ads or anything playing vote no on Prop 16. But what our detractors say is they say, hey, this is not a real issue. We do not need to put any time into this. And these are people trying to make stuff up to drive voter turnout. And in reality, this is a real issue because it's happening. Non-citizens are voting in some of the major cities around the U.S. There is a movement for non-citizens to participate in local government. I mean, in my home city of Dallas, Texas, it's happening right here. And what you'll see the opposition do, though, is they'll try and stall the legislation from getting through the legislature. So they'll have no urgency in trying to get it through. And then what you'll most frequently see when it comes to a vote on the House floor or Senate floor, people will never vote against it. Very few people will say, no, I don't want this, but they'll vote present. And when they're voting present, they're effectively voting no, and they're killing this. So, I mean, that's what happened, not in this past legislative session, but the one before in Texas, where the Democrats just all voted no, basically universally. There were a few that voted yes, but that prevented us from getting the 2/3 we needed to passing the House. So, I mean, that's what you see a lot of them do, where they know this is a very popular issue, and for whatever reason they don't support it, or they don't think it's a big issue. Those are the ones voting present because they want to make sure on the campaign trail they can't be blamed for voting no against something, even though effectively that's what they're doing.
Do you see momentum? Do you see that this is like a moment? There's momentum behind your movement, or do you think there's more momentum behind the other side? Because it feels to me like just kind of where these battles are happening. Like I said before, they're not really in overlapping jurisdictions, right? So we have red-ish areas or red states that are pushing one side, and you have blueberries and blue states pushing it, and on another side, and they're not really running into each other yet. It feels like there's something that's going to happen eventually, and they're going to push into one another. Like, do you think you're going to have, like, I guess the real question is, what are you doing to build a critical mass to push through to make this an issue that's not, well, to win on this issue across the whole country?
Yeah, so I think that's a fantastic question. So before Americans for Citizens Voting, the organization was stood up and very successful at passing this. I do think the movement of getting everyone involved in local government, citizen or non-citizen, did have some steam and momentum behind it, because there was no one to raise their voice and say, this is un-American. I mean, only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in elections. That's what people agree with. But I think now, like, the tide has turned. We do have a critical mass. I mean, we've passed a constitutional amendment, I believe, in 20 states. It's on the ballot in Texas in November. So, like, I do think as we continue to move forward and our argument is heard, I think it's a tremendous thing for people to use on the campaign trail as well. It's very popular. It's common sense. People agree with that. I mean, the most often question I get when I tell people I'm working on this, they say, is that a real thing? Is that a real issue? And then when you can explain the nuts and bolts of it and say, well, yeah, non-citizens are voting in local elections. You explain to them what home rule is. A lot will say, yeah, I could see, for example, Austin or San Antonio adopting something like that. And so, like, it is an issue. I believe we do have the upper hand. I think we have a lot of steam going into, especially 2026. I mean, I think we'll have a very successful November here in Texas. But I mean, a major state we're working on right now is Michigan. So if we're able to collect the necessary signatures to get on the ballot, we'll be on the ballot in Michigan 2026.
Okay. Well, good luck on that endeavor. So like you've mentioned, you said Republicans are basically united on this issue. But Texas in particular, we don't quite have supermajority. So it did require winning over some Democratic votes just to get this to the ballot. What was that effort like, right? So it's clear, with as much as we talk about election security and immigration,
Yes.
like, and all that sort of stuff on the Republican side, this is such a clear win for Republicans, or like a clear, yeah, we're going to do this as a Republican, that, like, it's like, okay, it's a given. But it did require some Democratic support. Like, how did your coalition go about winning that support over?
Well, this was a 3-year process for us, and it definitely wasn't easy. It was a challenge. So this involved 2 legislative sessions. So the first legislative session, 2023, we successfully made it through the Senate. Senator Birdwell, he was our sponsor, and that got through. We had to make it through the State Affairs Committee and then the Senate floor. And that made it through pretty easily. I mean, the Republicans, they have a supermajority in the Senate, and they're very good at handling business. But then we were off to the House. And Representative Charlie Kolean from Fort Worth, he was our sponsor in the House. Okay. I believe we made it. We were heard by the State Affairs Committee, made it through, no controversy at all, made it through the Calendars Committee. And I think it came down to, like, the second to third last day of the session. So it's like, hey, if we don't get it passed in this time, we're done. I mean, we're toast. Yeah. We're over. But we were feeling very confident because we made it through the Senate. I mean, given it was mostly Republican support, I think one senator voted against this, and I think even a Democrat senator, after hearing our testimony, signed on as a co-author. So I mean, we were feeling very strong bipartisan wise. But you know what? We got to the House floor, and I think this was at 11 o'clock at night or something, and it came up for a vote. And this was the first time we saw this happen around the country. We've seen it happen in other states now as well. But the Democrats all voted present. There were maybe 2 or 3 that voted yes, and maybe 2 or 3 that voted no. But they all went off the argument, this is not a real thing. We don't need to put this in the Constitution. This is a made-up issue. And we really had to learn some lessons from that. We primarily came into Texas in 2023 with like a Republican coalition. And when I came back in 2025, we knew we needed to diversify. So we got involved very early. We developed some champions with Democrats. And I mean, here's the thing, like, on this issue, it's very rare you'll find someone in the public eye who's just outright against it, because everyone knows it's popular. Everyone knows it's common sense. But privately, they'll say, yeah, I don't care. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to put it on the forefront of my legislative agenda or career. So we had to get these Democrats at least to see the wisdom of voting yes, and how, like, listen, if you vote yes on this, at least it's not a liability for you in the upcoming election. And we also used all of our arguments as well, where it's like, hey, citizenship is a long-term view. It should be U.S. citizens. There are Democrats in Texas that I would say that are very moderate as well, that do see, like, yeah, we don't want to go far left extreme politics. We don't want to have any of our cities turn into San Francisco, Washington, D.C., or sadly, I think the way New York is headed. But like, those are the conversations we had. I believe we needed about 17 Democrats or something to vote yes on this. I think it ultimately passed with like 101 votes, and we needed 100. So it was definitely this is how it worked in 2025. So it was maybe like a month or something now before the session was going to end. So I felt a lot better. We were a lot more efficient at moving through the process, so we weren't going to be a victim to politics. And they vote on something 3 times. So the first vote, I think we had like 96 votes, and it's like, well, that's failing, but they vote on it again. So the team that I was working with, they were really honest. They said, listen, some people weren't there, so we just got to hope, tomorrow no one has a doctor's appointment. Everyone who said they're going to vote is going to vote, and no one changes their mind or anything like that. So, thankfully that vote came up. I remember it was like 3-4 in the afternoon, and it passed. And that was like 3 years worth of hard work finally being a success. But, I'd say, like, you keep the argument as simple as possible. Okay. This is one vote for one citizen. Don't let it be an issue on the campaign trail. You get involved early. You develop some legislative champions. We had a lot more people in the legislature know what we were doing our second time around, where they actually knew myself, the cause, the issue, and they understood the policy behind it. And then it was one by one on making sure our friends on the left knew how to vote, and were happy and excited to vote that way too. So we really do owe it to the whole team for making this happen.
Well, that sounds awesome. It sounds like it was a lot of hard work to get it across the finish line. For those of you watching on YouTube or listening on podcasts, now's the time where we go over to Substack. We're going to finish our conversation over there. If you've been listening to us, Seeing Red Podcast.substack.com. You're going to head over there now to watch the rest of the interview. We're going to get really into the weeds on kind of the mechanics of pushing through a constitutional amendment and just what it takes to get that sort of stuff done here in Texas, as well as anything else that might pop up. Just have kind of a fun little conversation here. But we're going to talk for another about 30 more minutes. So if you're watching, thank you so much for continuing to watch over the years and today. But go ahead and subscribe to the Substack. And if not, we'll see you next week for our next episode. All right. Thanks, guys.